Over the last year, we've seen drastic changes in the used car market, and it's definitely changed the way people have bought cars. Prices have been dropping dramatically, and in this video, I'm going to look into why that is and what are the reasons for it, how things can change in the future. The used car market is completely changing. In the last year, we've seen a growth and a drop in sales, and it's been all over the place, as manufacturers face a challenging combination of slow retail sales, new targets, and competition from new entrants in Asia. Significant discounting is continuing. Throughout the UK and worldwide as well, we've seen massive drops in not only electric vehicles, but particularly in mid-size SUVs. The new car market is set to have a return push in 2024, and specifically with electric vehicles, there's going to be a lot more consumer demand with lower prices. As a result, it expects to grow 4% in the next year, and it's estimated to be 1.8 million. But why is the used car market increasing so much and having significant decreases in price? Well, essentially, dealers are seeing strong sales of used cars from 2023, but there's been a disconnect between the trade and the retail values in which some prices are all over the place. For example, Porsche Taycans have been dropping massively. This is quite literally a fire sale at the moment, and you can get lots of great cars for cheap. Take the Porsche Taycan, for example, under £50,000. Teslas, for example, have also seen a major decrease. Look at this one for around £16,000. Used car trade values have fell between 4.2% in November in the UK, and for the same month, Auto Trader revealed that used car prices are also at 2.5%. There's a huge gap between what's going on in the used car market, and there seems to be a bit of disconnect between retail and traders. On top of this, retailers are slashing their prices on used cars. Pretty much anything from electric to SUV has been falling on average £940. So let's deep dive into some of these reasons. After months of accelerating car prices over the last few years, we've seen a massive drop. Firstly, COVID. COVID made car prices absolutely insane. As sales of new cars slowed dramatically, and those people who weren't driving as much but would usually buy a new car decided not to go to the showroom, this caused a lot of factories to shut down, production was interrupted, and as a result, car prices went up, and this also impacted the second-hand market. So with that out of the way, we have the post-COVID years. You have to remember, in 2019, used vehicles were 30% cheaper than what they are today in the UK. And vehicles started to go up a little bit in price and started to retain their value. And then they had a bit of a roller coaster moment. And then after post-COVID, we had vehicles that went back into production again. We had manufacturers making more and everyone was happy. But of course, this meant people might still wait for electric vehicles, which in turn was over a year or two. Speaking of electric vehicles, one issue that we found in the used car market is vehicles that have not been keeping their value. Like I said before, the Tesla Model 3 has really lost its value, primarily because of other models in its range coming out, as well as an influx of more vehicles from Asian market, just making the price drop dramatically. On top of this, electric vehicles have also had the issue of infrastructure, as everyone knows, and the initial cost to buy was always high, or just run. We're seeing a huge decline in what people used to want and now are unable to or just don't want that anymore. So in summary, with the EV market, companies like Renault have been competing with Tesla and MG, and now we've got companies like BYD and VinFast coming into the European market. Essentially, there's so much supply now than there ever was 2 years ago that these prices have dropped as a result of that. Now, I'm not being mean to electric drivers, but it is kind of funny that they were all banging on about getting an electric car and now their prices have completely slashed in half. Next, on a financial standpoint, we've had the recession and continuing from COVID in the last few years. This has meant that vehicles started to increase over those times and production was expensive. Everything was just a lot more and still is in the cost of living. But as with everything, when people want to buy a new car financially, they usually go down the finance, hire purchase or leasing route. And so a lot of people haven't actually paid off these cars and just own a bit of them. Supply has increased due to new car supply increasing, and more cars were coming to the market than ever. You've probably seen over the last few years constant ads, images of new cars that are going to be releasing. And a lot of cars like this often go to exchanges, fleet returns and company cars. Take for example the Porsche Taycan that's been well spoken about over YouTube and TikTok. The Porsche Taycan, which I mentioned at the start of this video, has massively decreased. While still a great car and arguably a car that everyone still would like to own, it's a car that has really decreased over time because no one really wants to buy it. There's too many of them for sale, and this is the supply and demand situation. As a result, we've seen cars like this Porsche go below £50,000, which once was a £100,000 car. And so go back to the start of 2023 and where we are now, this has kind of been building up to a point where vehicles now are just starting to drop in price. It's been slowly happening and didn't happen overnight, but vehicles now are absolutely worth way less than what they used to be from January to November, which of course, as I mentioned, was a 4.2% drop. If you actually look at this chart, you can see a massive drop off, which is absolutely insane. And if you are looking for a bargain, then well, now is the time to get the car of your dreams. And if you're selling, I would avoid selling anything, particularly in the SUV market. Now that is a short summary of why used car prices have been declining since April, and a mixture of the last few years. But what are those cars that are actually impacted most? As I said, SUVs and electric cars have been the big hitter, but here's a list of the top 10 I'll just briefly go through. Now, poor Range Rover, they have such a terrible time at the moment, particularly for the owners. Anyone who's buying a Range Rover firstly has an extortionate amount of money to pay and running costs, but then you've got to deal with things like insurance because they're not getting insured in London now they have to have their own separate insurance. On top of that, they also break down quite frequently. I love a Land Rover, don't get me wrong, being a Land Rover owner must be tough. At number 10 there's the Range Rover Velar Diesel, which was down 25.4%. At number 9 there was the Vauxhall Grandland Hybrid, which was down 25.8%. Weirdly, at number 8 we have the BMW 2 Series Convertible, which was down 26.2%. I can only imagine people who buy this are hairdressers. At number 7 we have the Lexus Electric UX. This was down 27.1%. At number 6 we have another Vauxhall Grandland X at 27.1%. A lot of losses with medium-sized SUVs or electric vehicles here. At number 5 we have another medium-sized SUV, which is a Skoda Karoq, down 28.1%, losing an average of £5,400. At number 4 we have the Land Rover Discovery Sport Hybrid, which was down £10,900, down 28.3%. In at our top 3 now we have the Range Rover Sport Hybrid, which was down 28.3%. Hybrid vehicles in particular have been having a bit of an issue, and as you can see, companies are starting to beg for your attention when trying to buy a car. This isn't a bad thing for the consumer at all, but we are having more of a disparity. At number 2 we have the Renault Captur at 30.1%, losing £4,500. And at number 1 we have the Range Rover Evoque Hybrid, car that's been around for many years, but it's losing £11,000, down 30.4%. So not only is it a bad time to be a Range Rover owner, it's also a bad time to be, in particular, the smallest Range Rover Evoque owner, because they are losing the most money. Having a brand new Evoque sat on your drive is literally saying, I am losing money now. As a result of somewhat nearly 3 million cars missing from 2020 to 2022, supply constraints have continued to flow throughout the years, and with an Auto Trader's consumer sentiment metrics pointing to sustained levels of consumer demand, 78% of people do plan to buy in the next 6 months. That is pretty good going, and consumer demand is clearly there, but the vehicle demand is also there as well, meaning it has dropped. Rest assured though, we will see an increase of the used market once again, and retail prices should go back up in 2024. That being said, to more sustained levels, but obviously we've seen swings of both ways. Hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, don't forget to subscribe if you like the content.